Welcome to Bible Stories for Everyone. Today, we journey into one of the most powerful and emotional moments in the life of Jesus Christ. It is a story of friendship, sorrow, faith, delay, disappointment, and divine power. It is the story of Lazarus, the man Jesus raised from the dead. In the village of Bethany, not far from Jerusalem, there lived a family deeply loved by Jesus. There were two sisters, Mary and Martha, and their brother Lazarus. Their home was a place where Jesus was welcomed, honored, and loved. Whenever Jesus came to Bethany, he was not treated as a stranger. He was treated as a beloved friend. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were not merely people who had heard about Jesus from a distance. They knew him personally. They had listened to his words. They had seen his compassion. They believed in him. They trusted him. But one day, trouble entered their home. Lazarus became sick. At first, perhaps it seemed like an ordinary sickness. Maybe Martha cared for him with hope. Maybe Mary sat beside him, praying and waiting for his strength to return. But as the hours passed, Lazarus grew weaker. His condition became serious. The sisters became afraid. They knew Jesus had healed many people. They had heard of the blind receiving sight, the lame walking, and the sick being restored. They knew that if Jesus came, their brother could be healed. So they sent a message to him. "Lord, the one you love is sick." It was a simple message, but it carried deep faith. They did not need to explain who Lazarus was. They simply called him the one you love. They believed the love of Jesus would move him to come quickly. But when Jesus heard the message, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he said, "This sickness will not end in death. It is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha. He loved Mary. He loved Lazarus. Yet after hearing that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. To human eyes, this delay was confusing. Why would Jesus wait? Why would he not rush to Bethany? Why would he allow Mary and Martha to suffer in fear? Sometimes the silence of God can feel like absence. Sometimes his delay can feel like denial. But the story of Lazarus teaches us that Jesus is never late. He sees what we cannot see. He knows what we cannot understand. And even when he delays, he is still working toward a greater purpose. After 2 days, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." The disciples were concerned. They knew that the religious leaders in Judea had recently tried to harm Jesus. Going back was dangerous. They said, "Rabbi, a short while ago the people there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back." But Jesus was not controlled by fear. He knew his mission. He knew the will of the Father. He told them that Lazarus had fallen asleep and that he was going to wake him. The disciples misunderstood. They thought Jesus meant natural sleep. So Jesus spoke plainly, "Lazarus is dead." Then he added something surprising. "For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Jesus was not glad because Lazarus had died. He was glad because what was about to happen would reveal his glory in a way his disciples would never forget. Their faith was about to grow. Their understanding of who Jesus truly was about to deepen. So Jesus and his disciples began the journey to Bethany. By the time Jesus arrived, Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. The house of Mary and Martha was filled with mourners. Friends and neighbors had come to comfort them. The atmosphere was heavy with grief. Lazarus was gone. The hope of healing had passed. In their minds, Jesus had arrived too late. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. Mary stayed at home, overcome with sorrow. Martha approached Jesus, carrying the pain of a grieving sister. Her words were honest. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." There was faith in her words, but also heartbreak. She believed Jesus had power to heal. She believed Lazarus would have lived if Jesus had arrived earlier. But now, the tomb had already been sealed. For days had passed. The situation seemed final. Yet Martha did not stop there. She said, "But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Even in grief, there was still a spark of faith. Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." She believed in the future resurrection. She believed that one day at the end of time, God would raise the dead. But Jesus was about to show her something greater. He was not only talking about a future event, he was revealing his own identity. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Do you believe this? These words stand among the most powerful words Jesus ever spoke. He did not say, "I know about resurrection." He did not say, "I can teach resurrection." He said, "I am the resurrection and the life." Life was not merely something Jesus could give. Life was in him. Resurrection power belonged to him. Death itself was not greater than him. Martha answered with faith, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After saying this, Martha went back and called Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and he is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. The mourners who were with her saw her leave and followed, thinking she was going to the tomb to weep there. Mary came to the place where Jesus was. When she saw him, she fell at his feet. Her words were the same as Martha's. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Mary was broken. The people with her were weeping. The grief around Jesus was deep and real. And when Jesus saw Mary weeping and the people with her also weeping, he was deeply moved. Then Jesus asked, "Where have you laid him?" They answered, "Lord, come and see." And then, in one of the shortest but most powerful verses in Scripture, we read, Jesus wept. The Son of God stood before the tomb of his friend, and he cried. This moment reveals the heart of Jesus. He knew he was about to raise Lazarus. He knew the miracle was coming. He knew the sorrow would soon turn into joy, yet he still entered into their grief. Jesus was not distant from human pain. He did not ignore tears. He did not shame Mary and Martha for mourning. He stood with them in their sorrow. The people saw him weeping and said, "See how he loved him." But others questioned, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" It was the same question in a different form. Why did Jesus not come sooner? Why did he not prevent this? Why did he allow Lazarus to die? These questions often rise in moments of suffering. When pain comes, people wonder why God did not stop it. When loss happens, they ask why heaven seemed silent. But the story was not finished. Jesus came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. The mourners stood nearby. Mary and Martha watched. The disciples observed. The air was filled with sorrow, confusion, and expectation. Then Jesus gave command, "Take away the stone." Martha reacted immediately. "Lord, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Her concern was understandable. Lazarus had truly died. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a fainting spell. This was not a brief illness. Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. But Jesus turned to Martha and reminded her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the dark opening of the tomb. Martha and Mary watched through tears, unsure of what would happen next. The mourners who had come to comfort them looked on with a mixture of curiosity, doubt, and hope. Jesus stepped forward. Looking up toward heaven, he prayed, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." The crowd listened carefully. Every word seemed to echo through the stillness. Then Jesus turned toward the tomb. With a voice full of authority, power, and certainty, he cried out, "Lazarus, come out." For a brief moment, nothing happened. The crowd held its breath. Then, from deep within the tomb, movement could be heard. A few people stepped back in fear. Others stared in disbelief. Slowly, a figure began to emerge from the darkness. It was Lazarus. The man who had been dead for 4 days was walking out of the tomb. His hands and feet were still wrapped in burial cloths, and a cloth covered his face. Gasps swept through the crowd. Some wept openly. Others fell to their knees in amazement. Mary and Martha could hardly believe their eyes. Their brother was alive. The sorrow that filled their hearts was suddenly replaced with overwhelming joy. Jesus then said to those standing nearby, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." The people rushed forward and carefully removed the burial wrappings. Lazarus stood before them alive, healthy and restored. What had seemed impossible only moments before had become reality. The one standing before them was not merely a teacher or a miracle worker. He had just demonstrated his power over death itself. Many who witnessed this miracle believed in Jesus that day. They had seen with their own eyes that nothing is impossible for God. Yet the greatest miracle was not simply that Lazarus had been brought back to life. Jesus was revealing something far deeper. He wanted everyone present to understand that he is the resurrection and the life. Physical death does not have the final word when God is involved. The story of Lazarus teaches an important lesson. Sometimes God appears to be late. Martha and Mary believed that if Jesus had arrived sooner, their brother would not have died. From their perspective, all hope was gone. But God often works beyond human expectations. What looks like a delay may actually be preparation for a greater purpose. What seems impossible to people is never impossible for God. The story also reminds believers to trust God's timing. Faith is not believing only when answers come quickly. Faith is continuing to trust even when the situation grows darker and more difficult. When hope seems buried behind a stone, God can still bring life. When circumstances appear beyond repair, he can still make a way. Lazarus walked out of the tomb because Jesus called him by name. And the same God who called Lazarus from the grave still brings hope, restoration, and new beginnings today. The people of Bethany would never forget that day. The day death was defeated. The day a tomb was emptied. And the day Jesus revealed his glory for all to see.